Have you ever felt like a memory, a bitter event from the past, is holding you at the bottom of the ocean like an anchor, and no matter how much you struggle, you can't reach the surface? Have you ever reached a point where you feel there's no use in fighting anymore? Our story today is about two people standing at that exact point. A man whose spirit is buried under an avalanche of the past, and a woman whose body has returned from a tough battle, but now she must teach her soul to fly again. Fate ties these two together at the foot of a tall and dangerous mountain, a summit they call Mirror Peak, a place where anyone who reaches it comes face to face with their true self. Join us to see how these two strangers in the merciless cold of the mountain become the warmest point in each other's existence, and learn that sometimes to be saved, you must first become someone else's savior. For Jacob, the mountain was no longer an old friend. It was a vast, silent shadow that fell upon his wooden cabin every day, a shadow that kept the memories cold and heavy. His cabin, once a warm refuge for climbers and a hub for tales of ascent, had now turned into a desolate museum of past glories. The faint autumn light streamed through the dusty windows, casting golden lines on the equipment. On the walls, framed photos of towering peaks hung alongside colorful climbing ropes, their vibrancy now faded. Every ice axe, every coil of rope held a story of a conquest now gathering dust in the silence. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and the cold smoke of the fireplace. Jacob no longer resembled the smiling man in the photos. His unkempt beard was streaked with premature gray hairs, and his eyes, which once reflected the brilliance of the high-altitude sun, were now sunken and indifferent. His broad shoulders, once a symbol of strength, now seemed stooped under an invisible weight. He was the best mountain guide. Was past tense. 2 years ago, during a winter ascent, a small but merciless avalanche had taken his best friend and climbing partner Payman from him. Jacob survived, but his spirit was buried under that same snow. Now, the only thing he did was chop firewood with rhythmic, harsh blows, as if he wanted to shatter his thoughts along with the logs. The unfamiliar sound of an approaching car broke the rhythm of his axe. A modest car came up the dirt road and stopped beside the cabin. When the door opened, a woman got out who appeared fragile at first glance, but her steps showed a firm resolve. Her short hair, which was clearly growing back, framed a gaunt and pale face, a paleness that spoke of a long battle. But deep in her brown eyes, a fire burned, the fire of a survivor. She wore a warm but simple jacket, and her hiking boots, though clean, bore the scratches of training. Her name was Sara. With a voice that she tried to keep steady and unwavering, Sara said, "Mr. Jacob, I'm Sara. I heard you are the best guide in this region." Jacob drove the axe into a log without even looking at her and replied coldly, "You heard wrong. I don't guide anyone anymore." Sara took a step forward. Her stance was firm, like someone who had learned to stand on her own 2 feet. "I want to climb Mirror Peak." A bitter smirk touched Jacob's lips. He finally raised his head and locked his gaze on her. "Mirror Peak? That's not a tourist spot, ma'am. Many professionals don't even dare to try." "I know," she replied. "That's why I came to you." Sara paused and took a deep breath as if gathering all her strength for the next words. Look, a year ago, I finished my last chemotherapy session. The doctors told me it was a miracle I survived. During all that time, as I lay in the hospital bed, a picture of this peak was on my wall. I made a pact with myself that if I survived, I would conquer it. I want to prove to myself that I didn't just survive. I am living. I'll pay whatever your fee is. Hearing the word chemotherapy, Jacob's bitter smirk vanished. He saw in this woman's eyes the same fighting spirit that once existed within himself and Payman, the fight to survive. But his fear was greater than his empathy. I can't take responsibility for someone else's life. I'm sorry. Sara didn't give up. I'm not asking you to be responsible for my life. I am responsible for my own life. I'm just asking you to show me the way. I've done all the necessary training. I just need a guide. Jacob fell silent. He looked at the mountain behind Sara. The same mountain that had given him everything and taken everything from him. Something in this woman's will had slightly cracked the ice around his heart. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe the mountain was calling him again. He reluctantly muttered, "Tomorrow morning, before sunrise. If you're late, I'm leaving without you." A spark of hope shone in Sara's eyes, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared on her lips. "Thank you. I promise you won't regret it." Their journey began in silence. Jacob moved ahead like an emotionless machine. Every step he took was calculated and precise. Sara tried with all her might to keep up with him. The cold air burned her lungs, but every breath she took tasted of sweet victory. The first day passed with difficulty. They spent the night in a small shelter. They lit a small fire, and the silence between them was heavy. Finally, Sara broke the silence. "Can I ask, why did you stop mountaineering?" Jacob stared into the flames, as if seeing a memory in the dance of light and shadow. The mountain always gives you something, but sometimes it takes something away. 2 years ago, it took the most precious thing from me. He told Sara the story of the avalanche and Payman. He spoke of his guilt, of how he felt he should have done better. He trusted me, and I failed him. Sara listened intently. When Jacob finished, she said, "My illness felt the same way. As if my own body had betrayed me. For months, I hated myself. I thought I had done something to make it happen. But then I realized that sometimes bad things just happen. It's no one's fault. What matters is how we continue to live after they happen." Sara's simple words were like a balm on Jacob's old wound. For the first time in 2 years, he felt understood. The next day, their ascent took on a different color. They were no longer just two strangers. Jacob now patiently taught Sara techniques, encouraged her, and watched over her. And Sara, with her tireless spirit, reminded Jacob that life was still flowing. They reached the most difficult part of the route. The broken ridge, a narrow icy blade with a deep abyss on one side. This was the exact spot where Payman, the color drained from Jacob's face. His hands began to tremble. All the memories of that horrific day flooded his mind. The sound of Payman's scream, the roar of the avalanche, and the deathly silence that followed. His breathing became shallow and ragged. We have to go back. It's too dangerous." Sara, who had caught up to him, saw the fear in Jacob's eyes. This was no longer the strong, confident guide. This was a man kneeling before his past. Sara gently took the rope in her hand. Her voice was calm but firm. "Jacob, look at me." Jacob tore his gaze from the abyss and locked eyes with Sara. "You taught me how to face my fears. You said I should always focus on the next step, not the abyss. Now it's your turn." You can't bring Payman back, just as I can't erase the cancer cells from my body. They are part of our past, but we can't let them take our future from us, too. She took Jacob's hand. It was warm, full of life. We'll do this together. For Payman, for me, and most importantly, for yourself. Take your next step, Jacob. Sara's words were like an avalanche, but this time an avalanche of hope shattering the icy walls inside Jacob. A tear escaped from the corner of his eye and froze on the ice of the ridge. He looked at Sara, this woman who had returned from a battle with death and was now teaching him how to live. He took a deep breath, nodded, and took the first step onto the ridge. They finally reached the summit. Right at sunrise, a boundless world lay beneath their feet. The clouds floated in the valleys like a calm ocean, and the first rays of the sun painted the snowy peaks gold. The view was breathtaking. Sara cried with joy. This wasn't just conquering a mountain, it was reclaiming her life. She looked up at the sky and shouted, "I did it!" Jacob stood beside her for the first time in 2 years. He smiled, a genuine smile. He looked at the peak, which, like a mirror, reflected the image of the sky and the sunrise. But in that mirror, he also saw his own reflection, not a broken man, but a guide, someone who could still show others the way. He turned to Sara and said, "No, Sara, you weren't alone. We did it." They watched the sunrise in silence, 2 souls, each frozen in their own cold loneliness, now felt the warmth of a new beginning together. They had learned that the greatest peaks cannot be conquered alone, and that sometimes true strength lies in accepting help and giving hope. Their journey back was no longer filled with silence. It was filled with laughter, with plans for future climbs, and with talk about the life that now lay ahead of them. Jacob knew he would never forget Payman, but now he could live with his memory, not in his shadow, and Sara knew she would never again take life for granted. Every day was a new peak to conquer, and that was the story of Jacob and Sara. A story that reminds us that the greatest and most frightening peaks we must conquer are not made of rock and ice, but of fear, doubt, and the bitter memories of the past. Jacob and Sara showed us that we don't have to be alone to climb these inner peaks. Sometimes the strongest people are those who have the courage to reach out a hand for help. So, it's never too late to find your own life guide, or to become a guide for someone else. I hope you enjoyed this story and that it lit a spark of hope in your heart. If you liked this tale, be sure to give us energy with your likes and comments, and follow our channel so you don't miss our next stories. Goodbye.